Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the endless security line at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, her carry-on bag slung over her shoulder and her phone pressed against her ear. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed with that particular airport frequency that seemed designed to induce headaches. "No, Mrs. Patterson, you cannot take your husband's blood pressure medication for your anxiety," she said into the phone, trying to keep her voice patient despite the fact that she was officially on vacation as of 20 minutes ago. "Yes, I understand you're nervous about his surgery tomorrow, but—" The TSA agent waved her forward, and Sarah fumbled to end the call while juggling her belongings. After 18 months of covering extra shifts in the emergency room, she'd finally managed to take a week off. 7 whole days in Miami with nothing planned except reading trashy novels on the beach and remembering what it felt like to sleep past 5 in the morning. Her phone buzzed with another call from the hospital. She declined it and switched the device to airplane mode with more force than necessary. "Boarding Group A for Flight 472 to Miami," announced the gate agent, her voice crackling through the terminal speakers. Sarah checked her boarding pass and groaned. Seat 23B, middle seat in economy, sandwiched between strangers for the next 6 hours. She'd booked the trip last minute and taken whatever was available, but she was already regretting not splurging for an aisle seat. The line moved with typical airline efficiency, which is to say, not at all. Sarah found herself studying her fellow passengers. A businessman in an expensive suit was having an animated phone conversation about quarterly projections. A family with 3 young children was engaged in the eternal struggle of keeping everyone entertained with iPads and snacks. An elderly couple was sharing a crossword puzzle, debating whether 7 letters for stubborn was adamant or defiant. "Mom?" The gate agent's voice cut through Sarah's people-watching. "Your boarding pass?" Sarah handed it over, but the agent frowned at her screen. "I'm sorry, there seems to be an issue with your seat assignment. Let me check something." Issue? Sarah felt her vacation zen already evaporating. "What kind of issue?" The agent's fingers flew across her keyboard. "It looks like there was an overbooking situation, and we've had to make some adjustments. I have good news, though. We're upgrading you to first class." Sarah blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "Seat 2A, first class. Here's your new boarding pass." The agent handed her a fresh ticket with a smile that suggested this kind of miracle happened every day. Sarah stared at the boarding pass like it might disappear if she looked away. "Are you sure? I mean, is there a catch?" "No catch. Just our way of apologizing for the inconvenience. Enjoy your flight." Still slightly stunned, Sarah made her way down the jet bridge. First class. She'd never flown first class in her life. As a medical student, resident, and now attending physician, every dollar went toward loan payments or savings. The most luxurious thing she'd done in the past year was buying the name-brand cereal instead of the generic version. The flight attendant, a polished woman in her 40s with a practiced smile, directed Sarah to her seat. Row 2, window seat. The leather was actually leather, not the vinyl pretending to be leather she was used to. The seat was wide enough that she could probably curl up sideways if she wanted to. "Can I offer you something to drink before takeoff?" the flight attendant asked. "Champagne? Orange juice?" Water is fine," Sarah said, then caught herself. When would she ever be in first class again? "Actually, could I have the champagne?" "Of course. I'll be right back." Sarah settled into her seat and looked around. The other first-class passengers seemed to belong here in a way she definitely didn't. Designer handbags, expensive watches, the kind of casual confidence that came from never having to check your bank balance before making a purchase. The seat next to her was still empty, though the flight was supposed to depart in 15 minutes. Maybe she'd get lucky and have the extra space to spread out. She pulled out her phone to text her best friend Jenny about the upgrade, then remembered it was still in airplane mode. "Excuse me." A deep voice interrupted her fumbling with the phone. "I think that's my seat." Sarah looked up and immediately felt underdressed. The man standing in the aisle was probably in his early 30s, with dark hair that looked like it had been styled by someone who charged more than Sarah made in a day. His suit was the kind that definitely didn't come off the rack, and his watch caught the cabin lights in a way that suggested it cost more than her car. More importantly, he was looking at her with the sort of polite confusion usually reserved for finding someone in your assigned parking spot. "Oh," Sarah checked her boarding pass again. "No, this is 2A. See?" She held up the pass. He pulled out his own boarding pass and held it next to hers. "That's interesting, because this is also 2A. Sarah leaned closer to look, catching a hint of expensive cologne that probably had a name like Executive Power or Midnight in Monaco. Sure enough, his boarding pass also read 2A. "Well, this is awkward," she said, then immediately cringed. That wasn't the kind of thing first-class people probably said. They probably had elegant ways of handling seating disputes, involving polite phone calls to assistants and smooth resolutions that didn't involve anyone feeling awkward. The man, Marcus, according to the boarding pass she could now see clearly, didn't seem offended by her awkwardness. In fact, the corner of his mouth twitched in what might have been amusement. "It happens more often than you'd think," he said. "Usually there's some sort of system glitch. I'll grab the flight attendant." He flagged down the same attendant who'd offered Sarah champagne. "We seem to have a duplicate seat situation," Marcus said, his tone friendly, but with the subtle authority of someone used to having problems solved quickly. The flight attendant checked both boarding passes, then her tablet, then consulted with another crew member. There was a lot of whispering and screen tapping. "I'm so sorry for the confusion," she finally said. "It looks like there was a computer error when we processed the upgrade. Mr. Wellington, you're actually in 2B, not 2A. Marcus glanced at the seat she was indicating, the middle seat between Sarah and a businessman who was already settling in with a laptop and what appeared to be a very important spreadsheet. "The middle seat," Marcus said, and something in his tone suggested this was not a familiar experience. "I could move," Sarah offered, though the words came out reluctantly. She really didn't want to give up the window seat, especially since she'd never had a first-class window seat before, and might never again. "Don't be ridiculous," Marcus said, and slid into 2B with the resigned grace of someone accepting an unpleasant but temporary situation. "Though I have to ask, what did you do to anger the airline gods? First they give me your seat, then they stick me in the middle." Sarah couldn't help but smile. "Maybe it's karmic payback for all the times I've secretly judged people who take forever to put their bags in the overhead compartments." "Ah, a fellow airline etiquette critic," Marcus said as he buckled his seatbelt. "What about the people who recline their seats the second the seatbelt sign turns off?" "Monsters," Sarah said solemnly, "especially on short flights. Like, we're going to be in the air for an hour and a half, and you need those extra 3 inches of recline space? Or the people who try to board with Group A when their boarding pass clearly says Group E," Marcus added. "The worst are the ones who stand up and crowd the aisle the second the plane stops moving, even though we all know we're going to sit there for another 10 minutes while they connect the jet bridge," Sarah said. The businessman on Marcus's other side looked up from his laptop with mild annoyance, as if their conversation was interfering with his very important spreadsheet work. "Sorry," Sarah said automatically, though she wasn't really sorry. If Mr. Spreadsheet didn't want to hear conversations, he should have worn headphones. Marcus leaned slightly toward her, lowering his voice. "Don't apologize. He's doing the thing where he angles his laptop so everyone can see how busy and important he is. Classic airplane peacocking." Sarah bit back a laugh. She hadn't expected Mr. Expensive Suit to be observant about social dynamics, much less funny about them. The flight attendant returned with Sarah's champagne and asked Marcus what he'd like to drink. "Whiskey, neat," he said, then glanced at Sarah's champagne. "Actually, make that champagne when in Rome." "We're going to Miami," Sarah pointed out. "When in first class, then," Marcus corrected with a smile that transformed his face from merely handsome to genuinely attractive. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom, announcing their departure and the flight time to Miami. Sarah settled back in her seat, champagne in hand, still slightly amazed by her upgrade luck. "So," Marcus said as the plane began to taxi, "what takes you to Miami? Business or pleasure?" "Vacation," Sarah said. "Though given that I haven't taken a real vacation in about 2 years, I'm not entirely sure I remember how to do pleasure." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "That sounds ominous. What do you do?" "I'm a doctor, emergency medicine." Sarah took a sip of champagne, which was admittedly much better than anything she'd ever had before. "What about you?" "Business," Marcus said, and something in his tone suggested the topic wasn't his favorite. "Family business, actually. Hotels." "That sounds glamorous," Sarah said. Marcus made a sound that might have been a laugh or a snort. "It's something, all right. Though I suspect your job is considerably more meaningful than mine." There was an unexpected note of, what was it? Resignation, frustration. Sarah found herself curious about this well-dressed man who made self-deprecating comments about his presumably successful career. "I don't know," she said. "Hotels make people happy. Vacations, special occasions, business trips that don't completely suck because at least the bed is comfortable. That seems pretty meaningful to me." Marcus looked at her with what appeared to be genuine surprise. "You know, I don't think anyone's ever put it quite like that before." The plane lifted off, and Sarah felt the familiar flutter of excitement that came with takeoff. She'd been flying since she was a kid. Her parents had moved to Seattle from Taiwan when she was 5, and family visits meant regular trips across the Pacific. But she still got a little thrill from watching the ground fall away. "Good view?" Marcus asked, noticing her fascination with the window. "Always," Sarah said. "I know it's silly, but I never get tired of the takeoff. It's like proof that impossible things happen every day. I mean, this giant metal tube full of people shouldn't be able to fly, but here we are." "That's not silly at all," Marcus said. "Though I have to admit, I usually spend takeoff answering emails or reviewing reports. I can't remember the last time I actually looked out the window." "That's tragic," Sarah said with mock seriousness. "You're missing one of the best parts of flying." "What are the other best parts?" Sarah considered this. "The moment when you reach cruising altitude and everything gets smooth. The way clouds look from above, like you could walk on them. The landing, especially at night when you can see all the city lights spread out like a circuit board, or Christmas decorations." She paused, realizing she was probably sounding like a travel blog. "Sorry, I get a little enthusiastic about flying. Occupational hazard of not doing it very often." "Don't apologize," Marcus said, and he sounded like he meant it. "When was the last time you took a vacation?" Sarah had to think about it. "Real vacation, like more than a long weekend, 2 years ago. My residency ended, and I took a week off before starting my attending position. Went to visit my parents, and spent most of it sleeping. And this time, I'm planning to lie on the beach, read terrible romance novels, and eat entirely too much seafood," Sarah said. "Very sophisticated stuff." "Sounds perfect, actually," Marcus said, and there was something wistful in his voice. "What about you? Is this a vacation or—" "Work," Marcus said. "One of our hotels is having some management issues. I'm flying down to assess the situation and probably fire some people." He took a sip of his champagne. "Like I said, glamorous." "That doesn't sound fun," Sarah said. "It's not," Marcus agreed, "but it's necessary. The hotel industry is all about reputation, and when one property starts sliding, it can affect the whole brand. Better to cut losses quickly than let problems spread." Sarah studied his profile as he spoke. There was something resigned about the way he talked about his work, like he was describing a particularly unpleasant medical procedure rather than his career. "How long have you been in the hotel business?" she asked. "My whole life, in one way or another," Marcus said. "My family owns Wellington Hotels. Maybe you've heard of them." Sarah shook her head. "Should I have?" Marcus looked genuinely pleased by her ignorance. "No reason you should, unless you travel for business a lot. We're mostly focused on luxury business travel, the kind of places where companies put executives when they want to impress clients." So fancy hotels for fancy people, Sarah said. That's actually a pretty accurate summary, Marcus said with a laugh, though I'd probably phrase it as premium accommodations for discerning travellers in a board meeting. Much more elegant, Sarah agreed. Do you enjoy it, the hotel business? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, long enough that Sarah wondered if she'd overstepped somehow. But then he said, "That's a more complicated question than it should be." Before Sarah could ask what he meant, the flight attendant appeared to offer them lunch menus. First-class menus, with options like pan-seared salmon with quinoa pilaf, and grass-fed beef tenderloin with roasted vegetables. "This is surreal," Sarah muttered, studying the options. "What is?" Marcus asked. "This whole thing? The upgrade, the actual good food, the champagne that doesn't come from a tiny plastic bottle. I keep waiting for someone to realize there's been a mistake and send me back to economy." "Well, if they do, I'll vouch for you," Marcus said. "Tell them you're clearly first-class material." Sarah felt her cheeks warm slightly. "Based on what evidence?" "You appreciate takeoffs, you don't hog the armrest, and you haven't once checked your phone since we've been talking," Marcus said. "Also, you asked if I enjoy my work, which suggests you think about jobs as more than just ways to make money. That's pretty rare in first class, in my experience." "Maybe you've been flying with the wrong first-class people," Sarah suggested. "Maybe I have," Marcus said, and something in his tone made Sarah look at him more carefully. The flight attendant returned to take their orders. Sarah chose the salmon, partly because it sounded delicious and partly because she figured this might be her only chance to eat airline food that wasn't a sad sandwich or a bag of pretzels. "Same for me," Marcus said when it was his turn. "Playing it safe?" Sarah asked. "Following the recommendation of someone with good judgment," Marcus said. They fell into a comfortable conversation as lunch was served. Sarah learned that Marcus had an MBA from Wharton, had lived in New York for the past 8 years, and had a younger sister who was a marine biologist and the smart one in the family, according to him. Marcus learned that Sarah had grown up in Seattle, gone to medical school at the University of Washington, and had parents who still asked her when she was going to settle down and give them grandchildren. "How old are you?" Marcus asked. "If you don't mind me asking." 29, Sarah said. "You? 32? And let me guess, your parents think 29 is practically ancient for not being married." "My mother sends me articles about fertility declining after 30, Sarah said with a grimace. "Very subtle. What about your family? Do they pressure you about settling down?" "My father's more concerned with me settling into the business," Marcus said. "He keeps talking about succession planning and legacy and making sure the Wellington name continues to mean something in hospitality." "And what do you think about that?" Marcus was quiet again, swirling his champagne in its plastic first-class cup. "I think there are worse problems to have than being expected to run a successful family business." It was a diplomatic answer, but Sarah sensed there was more to it. She was trying to figure out how to ask without being nosy when the plane hit a patch of turbulence that sent her champagne sloshing dangerously close to the rim of her cup. "Whoa!" she said, steadying the drink. That was... The plane dropped suddenly, enough to make her stomach lurch and send the businessman's laptop sliding across his tray table. The seatbelt sign dinged on, and the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Folks, we're hitting some unexpected rough air. Flight attendants, please take your seats. Everyone else, make sure those seatbelts are nice and tight." Another drop, worse than the first. Sarah's hands tightened on her champagne cup, and she was suddenly very aware of being 35,000 feet in the air in a metal tube that was currently being tossed around like a toy. "You okay?" Marcus asked, and Sarah realized she must have made some kind of sound. "Fine," she said, then immediately felt foolish. She was a doctor. She dealt with medical emergencies, life and death situations, blood and trauma, and people depending on her to stay calm under pressure. A little airplane turbulence shouldn't faze her, but somehow, being out of her element, in first class, on vacation, talking to a handsome stranger instead of handling a crisis made the turbulence feel more unsettling than it probably was. The plane bucked again, and this time Marcus's champagne did spill, spreading across his tray table and dripping onto his expensive suit pants. "Damn," he muttered, grabbing his napkin. "Here," Sarah said, handing him hers as well. "The trick is to blot, don't rub. Rubbing will just spread the stain." "Voice of experience?" Marcus asked, dabbing at the wet spot. "Medical training. You learn to deal with all kinds of spills," Sarah said, then immediately regretted the phrasing. "That sounded less disgusting in my head." Marcus laughed, a genuine sound that somehow made the turbulence seem less threatening. "I'll take your word for it. Though I have to say, this is not how I usually introduce myself to attractive strangers." Sarah felt her cheeks heat up again. "By spilling champagne on yourself?" "By being charming and sophisticated, obviously," Marcus said with a self-deprecating smile. "This is more like a sitcom meet cute." "Well, we're stuck next to each other for another 4 hours," Sarah said. "Plenty of time to work on the charm and sophistication." The turbulence was settling down, the plane's movement becoming less violent and more of a gentle rocking. The businessman had successfully saved his spreadsheet and was shooting dirty looks at Marcus's still damp napkins. "Sorry about the commotion," Marcus said to him politely. The businessman just grunted and turned back to his laptop. "Friendly," Sarah observed quietly. "He's probably having a worse day than we are," Marcus said. "At least we're getting entertainment out of our seating mix-up." "Is that what this is? Entertainment?" Marcus met her eyes, and Sarah felt something shift in the air between them, something that had nothing to do with airplane turbulence. "I'm hoping so," he said. "The alternative is that I'm having the most interesting conversation I've had in months with someone I'll never see again after we land in Miami." Sarah felt a flutter in her chest that definitely wasn't related to the plane's movement. "That would be unfortunate." "It would," Marcus agreed. The flight attendant came by to collect their lunch trays and check that they were all right after the turbulence. Sarah realized that somewhere between the champagne and the conversation, and the moment when Marcus had asked if she was okay with what seemed like genuine concern, she'd stopped thinking about him as a stranger who happened to be sitting next to her. Which was probably dangerous, she told herself. She was going to Miami for a week of relaxation, not to get involved with someone whose life was clearly very different from hers, someone who probably flew first class regularly and owned more than one expensive suit and lived in a world she knew nothing about. But as Marcus settled back in his seat and asked her about her favorite terrible romance novels, Sarah found herself thinking that maybe, just maybe, a little danger was exactly what her perfectly planned, carefully controlled life needed. The Miami airport was a wall of humidity and chaos that hit Sarah the moment they stepped off the jet bridge. After 6 hours of climate-controlled luxury and easy conversation with Marcus, the real world felt jarring. "Well," Marcus said, adjusting his carry-on strap, "this is where we—" "Sarah! Dr. Chen!" They both turned to see a harried-looking man in scrubs jogging toward them, dodging tourists with rolling suitcases. "Dr. Rodriguez?" Sarah blinked in confusion. "What are you doing here?" "Thank God I found you," he panted. "There's been an emergency, multi-car accident on I-95, and Miami General is completely overwhelmed. They put out a call for any available trauma surgeons, and when they heard you were flying in..." Sarah felt her vacation plans crumbling in real time. "How did they even know I was on this flight?" "Hospital administration has ways," Rodriguez said grimly. "Look, I know you're supposed to be on vacation, but we really need you. Just for tonight, maybe tomorrow morning. After that, the beach is all yours." Marcus was watching this exchange with growing understanding. "You're not just a doctor," he said slowly. "You're a trauma surgeon." "Emergency medicine with trauma specialization," Sarah confirmed absently, her mind already shifting into work mode. "Dr. Rodriguez, what's the casualty count?" 12 vehicles, at least 20 injured. 3 critical." Rodriguez's expression was grim. Sarah, I wouldn't ask if... I know. She turned to Marcus with an apologetic smile. So much for my grand vacation plans, right? Hey! Marcus caught her arm gently. This is what you do, save lives. That's incredible. Something in his tone made her look at him more closely. There was admiration there, but also something that looked almost like envy. It's just my job, she said. No, it's not. It's who you are. Marcus pulled out his phone. What hospital? Miami General, Rodriguez answered. Marcus was already dialing. This is Marcus Wellington. I need a car sent to Miami International immediately. 2 passengers to Miami General Hospital. Yes, emergency situation. No, faster than that. He hung up and looked at Sarah. Car will be here in 10 minutes. My family has an account with a service here. You don't have to. Yes, I do, Marcus said firmly. You're about to save people's lives. Least I can do is make sure you get there quickly. Rodriguez looked between them with obvious curiosity, but was professional enough not to comment. I'll meet you there, Sarah. And thank you. As he hurried away, Sarah found herself alone with Marcus in the middle of the busy terminal. The easy intimacy of their flight conversation felt different here, more fragile. This is not how I imagined saying goodbye, she said. Who says we're saying goodbye? Marcus asked. I'm staying at the Wellington South Beach. It's one of ours. When you're done saving the world, call me. He handed her a business card that felt expensive between her fingers. Marcus Wellington III, Executive Vice President, Wellington Hotels. The third? Sarah raised an eyebrow. How very royal of you. Family tradition. My great-grandfather started the company, though right now I'm more interested in being Marcus, who met an amazing doctor on a plane, than Marcus Wellington III anything. A black sedan pulled up to the curb outside. Marcus gestured toward it. Your chariot awaits, Dr. Chen. As they walked toward the car, Sarah felt the familiar pre-emergency adrenaline starting to kick in. Her mind was already running through trauma protocols, thinking about what she might encounter at the hospital. Hey, Marcus said as the driver loaded her bag into the trunk. I meant what I said. Call me, even if it's just to tell me how it went. I might not have time, then I'll wait, Marcus said simply, however long it takes. The car ride to Miami General was a blur of palm trees and traffic. Sarah used the time to call the hospital and get updates on the incoming casualties. By the time they pulled up to the emergency entrance, she was fully in doctor mode. Marcus got out with her, despite her protests that he didn't need to. Thank you, she said, meaning it. For the car, for understanding about Sarah. He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne again. Be careful in there. It's what I do, she said, but her voice came out softer than intended. I know. It's just... Marcus seemed to struggle with something. I spent 6 hours talking to the most interesting person I've met in years, and I'm not ready for that to be over. Before Sarah could respond, the emergency room doors burst open and Dr. Rodriguez appeared with a trauma team. Sarah, we need you now. 3 ambulances just arrived. The next 18 hours passed in a blur of surgery, crisis management, and controlled chaos. Sarah lost herself in the familiar rhythm of emergency medicine, the split-second decisions, the careful choreography of trauma surgery, the moments when everything hung in the balance. It was past noon the next day when she finally emerged from the hospital, exhausted but satisfied. All but one of the accident victims had made it through surgery successfully, and that one had been touch and go from the start. She stood on the hospital steps, blinking in the bright Florida sunshine, and pulled out Marcus's business card. It was wrinkled now from being in her scrub's pocket, but his phone number was still legible. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Hope everything went well. No pressure, but there's a very good coffee shop near the beach if you're interested. Sarah stared at the message. Part of her wanted to go back to her hotel, shower, and sleep for 12 hours. The sensible part that had gotten her through medical school and residency and the demanding early years of her career. But a bigger part The part that had enjoyed champagne at 35,000 feet and laughed at airplane etiquette jokes with a handsome stranger, wanted to see where this could go. She typed back, "Just finished. Coffee sounds perfect. Where?" The response came immediately, "Sending a car. You've done enough life-saving for one day." 20 minutes later, Sarah found herself in another black sedan, this time heading towards South Beach. She'd managed a quick change of clothes in the hospital bathroom, but she was still wearing scrubs under her jacket, and her hair was pulled back in the same messy bun she'd worn into surgery. The car pulled up to a small cafe with outdoor seating overlooking the beach. Marcus was already there, but he looked different. Gone was the expensive suit from the plane. Instead, he was wearing jeans and a simple white t-shirt, and somehow he looked more like himself. "Dr. Chen," he said, standing as she approached, "you look like you could use some caffeine." "I look like I could use a coma," Sarah corrected, but she was smiling. "But caffeine will do for now." They ordered coffee, real coffee, not the hospital vending machine variety Sarah had been surviving on, and found a table with a view of the ocean. "So," Marcus said once they were settled, "how many lives did you save last night?" "It doesn't work like that," Sarah said automatically, then caught his expression. "Sorry, medical professionals are taught not to think in those terms. Too much ego involved, but we had good outcomes, better than we initially expected." "That's incredible," Marcus said. "I mean it. What you do, it matters in a way that's immediate and tangible. People are alive today because you were on that plane." There was something in his voice that made Sarah study his face more carefully. "What about what you do? You said last night that you weren't sure you enjoyed the hotel business." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, watching the waves roll onto the beach. "Can I tell you something I've never said out loud before?" "Of course." "I hate it," Marcus said simply. "Not hotels themselves, not hospitality or making people comfortable or creating experiences. I hate being Marcus Wellington III, heir apparent to a legacy I never chose. I hate board meetings about quarterly profits and expansion strategies and brand management. I hate that my father looks at me and sees the next CEO instead of, I don't know, his son." The confession hung in the air between them. Sarah had the sense that Marcus had surprised himself by saying it. "What would you do instead?" she asked gently. "If you could choose anything." Marcus laughed, but it wasn't entirely happy. "You know what's pathetic? I'm 32 years old, and I honestly don't know. I went straight from prep school to Ivy League college to business school to the family company. I've never taken time to figure out what I actually want." "It's not pathetic," Sarah said. "It's just different from my experience. I always knew I wanted to be a doctor. Even as a kid, I was fascinated by how bodies work, how to fix things when they break." "When did you know for sure?" "I was 15. My grandmother had a heart attack, and I watched the EMTs work on her, saw how they stayed calm and focused, even when everything was chaotic. She died anyway, but I knew that was what I wanted to do, be the person who stayed calm in the chaos." Marcus nodded slowly. "I can see that about you. Even yesterday at the airport, when Rodriguez showed up with the emergency, you just shifted, like you'd been waiting for it." "Maybe I had been," Sarah admitted. "I'm not very good at relaxing. Vacations make me nervous." "Why?" Sarah considered the question. "Because when I'm not working, I don't always know who I am. Work gives me purpose, structure, a way to measure whether I'm doing something worthwhile with my life. Without it," she shrugged, "I'm just someone sitting on a beach reading romance novels." "What's wrong with that?" "Nothing, I guess. It just feels frivolous." "Says the woman who spent 18 hours straight saving people's lives," Marcus pointed out. "Maybe frivolous is exactly what you need." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the beach scene unfold in front of them. Families building sandcastles, joggers following the waterline, tourists taking selfies with the ocean as a backdrop. "Can I ask you something?" Sarah said eventually. "Anything. Yesterday on the plane, you seemed different, more relaxed, I guess, like yourself. But when you talk about your work, your family's business, you get this look, like you're putting on armor." Marcus was quiet for so long that Sarah wondered if she'd overstepped. But then he said, "You're very observant for someone who claims not to be good at anything besides medicine. Occupational hazard. You learn to read people quickly in the ER." "The thing is," Marcus said slowly, "I think yesterday was the first time in years that someone talked to me without knowing who I was first. You didn't Google me on the plane, didn't recognize the Wellington name, didn't treat me like a networking opportunity or a potential business connection. You just talked to me because you were interesting," Sarah said. "You made me laugh. You asked about my work like you actually cared about the answer, not like you were just being polite." "I did care," Marcus said. "I do care. About your work, about you." The words hung between them, heavier than airplane turbulence. Sarah felt her heart do something complicated. "Marcus," she started, but he held up a hand. "I know," he said. "I know this is crazy. We met yesterday. You live in Seattle, I live in New York. You save lives, I arrange hotel amenities for rich people. But I can't stop thinking about what you said on the plane, about impossible things happening every day." Sarah looked at him. Really looked at him, at the way his hair fell across his forehead, at the genuine uncertainty in his expression, at the way he was holding his coffee cup like he needed something to do with his hands. "What are you saying?" she asked. "I'm saying I don't want this to end when you fly back to Seattle," Marcus said. "I'm saying maybe this is one of those impossible things that's actually possible." "This is insane," Sarah said, but she was smiling when she said it. They'd moved from the coffee shop to a beachside restaurant as the afternoon wore on, neither wanting to end the conversation. Marcus had insisted on ordering for both of them, something he claimed was the best stone crab in Miami, and Sarah had been too tired to argue. "Define insane," Marcus said, cracking open a crab claw with more expertise than Sarah had expected from someone who probably ate at five-star restaurants regularly. "We met 24 hours ago. You're from New York, I'm from Seattle. Your idea of casual dining probably costs more than my monthly grocery budget." Sarah gestured around the restaurant, which was admittedly much fancier than anywhere she'd normally eat. "And now you're talking about—" "What exactly are you talking about?" Marcus set down his crab cracker and looked at her directly. "I'm talking about not wanting to pretend this is just a vacation fling. I'm talking about wanting to see you again after this week. But how would that even work?" "I don't know," Marcus admitted. "But I know I haven't felt this interested in anyone in— honestly, I can't remember how long. And I know that you're the first person I've told about hating my job, which should probably terrify me more than it does." Sarah's phone buzzed with a text. She glanced at it, expecting another hospital update, but it was from her friend Jenny. "How's the vacation going? Please tell me you're doing something scandalous." "Hospital?" Marcus asked, noticing her expression. "Friend checking on my vacation progress," Sarah said. "She's probably expecting updates about fruity drinks and terrible tourist attractions. What are you going to tell her?" Sarah looked at Marcus, at his expensive watch catching the afternoon light, at the way he was waiting for her answer like it mattered. "That it's complicated," she said finally. Marcus's phone rang before he could respond. He glanced at the screen, and his expression shifted into something Sarah was beginning to recognize, the armor look. "I have to take this," he said apologetically. "It's about the hotel situation." "Marcus Wellington," he answered, and his entire demeanor changed. His voice became more formal, his posture straighter. "No, I told you we'd discuss staffing changes after I'd reviewed the quarterly reports, because firing half the management team without a transition plan is exactly the kind of short-sighted thinking that got us into this mess." Sarah watched this transformation with fascination and growing unease. This was Marcus Wellington III, Executive Vice President. The man who'd spilled champagne on himself and made jokes about airplane etiquette seemed to have disappeared entirely. "Look, I'll be there in an hour," Marcus said into the phone. "Don't make any personnel decisions until I arrive." "Yes, I understand the timeline." "No, I don't care what the Miami Herald might report." He hung up and turned back to Sarah, but the easy intimacy of the past hour felt strained now. "Work emergency?" Sarah asked. "The hotel manager I came here to fire has apparently decided to beat me to it by quitting, in a very public way, with quotes to the local business reporter about unrealistic corporate expectations and out-of-touch ownership. Sounds messy." "It's a nightmare," Marcus said, rubbing his forehead. "This is exactly the kind of publicity that can damage our reputation in the Miami market. I need to get over there, do damage control, probably spend the next 6 hours in crisis management mode." Sarah nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. "Of course. Go handle your crisis." Marcus caught her tone. "Sarah, I'm sorry. The timing is terrible, but this is your real life," Sarah said, understanding dawning. "Hotel crises and damage control and corporate reputation management. This is what you do." "Yes, but... and I'm what? A vacation distraction from all that?" "No." Marcus's voice was sharp. "You're not a distraction, you're..." He trailed off, looking frustrated. Sarah waited, but he seemed to struggle with how to finish the sentence. "I should go," she said finally, reaching for her purse. "You have work to do, and I should probably try to salvage what's left of my vacation." "Sarah, wait." Marcus caught her hand. "This isn't how I wanted this afternoon to end." "How did you want it to end?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. "I wanted to ask if you'd have dinner with me tomorrow night. Somewhere that isn't about business or networking or corporate image. Just us." Sarah looked down at his hand, covering hers. His fingers were long and well manicured, with a signet ring that probably had his family crest or initials or some other symbol of the world he belonged to. "And if there's another hotel crisis tomorrow?" she asked. "There won't be." "You can't promise that." Marcus was quiet because they both knew she was right. "The thing is," Sarah said gently, "I think you're a good person, Marcus. I think under all the corporate armor, you're funny and thoughtful and probably a lot more interesting than you give yourself credit for. But I also think you're not sure who you are when you're not being Marcus Wellington III, and I can't be the person you figure that out with." "Why not?" "Because I'm still figuring out who I am when I'm not Dr. Chen," Sarah said. "And two people who don't know themselves outside of their jobs probably shouldn't try to figure out a relationship." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful. "So, this is it? We just go back to our separate lives and pretend yesterday never happened?" Sarah felt something twist in her chest. "I don't know. Maybe. I just think maybe we met at the wrong time. Or maybe we met at exactly the right time, and we're both too scared to see what that means," Marcus said. Before Sarah could respond, his phone rang again. Marcus looked at the screen with obvious frustration. "Take it," Sarah said. "It's your job." Marcus hesitated, then declined the call. "Let me drive you back to your hotel." "I can get a cab." "Sarah," Marcus's voice was quiet. "Please. Let me at least do that." The drive back to Sarah's hotel was awkwardly silent. She stared out the window at the Miami scenery, trying not to think about how different everything felt from just an hour ago. "For what it's worth," Marcus said as they pulled up to her hotel, "you're right, about me not knowing who I am outside of work. But yesterday, on the plane, talking to you, that felt like the most myself I've been in years." Sarah looked at him, at the genuine uncertainty in his expression. "Maybe that's something you need to figure out. Who Marcus is when he's not performing for his father or the board or the business reporters. And maybe you need to figure out who Sarah is when she's not saving people," Marcus said quietly. They looked at each other across the car's interior, both recognizing the truth in what the other had said. "Enjoy your vacation," Marcus said finally. "You deserve it." "Good luck with your hotel crisis," Sarah replied. She got out of the car and walked into her hotel without looking back. But she could feel Marcus watching her until the doors closed behind her. Sarah spent the next 2 days doing exactly what she'd planned. lying on the beach, reading romance novels, and trying not to think about Marcus Wellington. She was moderately successful at the first two activities. The not thinking about Marcus part was proving more challenging. "You're doing that thing again," said the woman on the beach chair next to her. Sarah looked up from her book, a particularly ridiculous story about a billionaire who falls for his fake fiancée, to find an older woman with silver hair and knowing eyes watching her with amusement. "What thing?" Sarah asked. "That thing where you read the same page 3 times because your mind is somewhere else entirely," the woman said. "I'm Eleanor, by the way. I've been watching you not read that book for the past hour." "Sarah," she replied, closing the book with a sigh. "And you're right. I'm terrible at relaxing. Work on your mind." "Something like that." Sarah sat up in her beach chair. "What about you? Are you better at vacationing than I am?" Eleanor laughed. "Honey, I've been coming to Miami Beach for 15 years. My late husband and I used to stay at that big Wellington hotel up the beach. But after he passed, I switched to this little place. More my speed now." "Wellington Hotel?" Sarah's attention sharpened despite herself. "Beautiful property, very fancy, very expensive. They cater to the kind of people who think a vacation isn't worth taking unless it costs more than most people's cars." Eleanor's tone was dry but not unkind. "Though I heard they're having some management troubles lately. Something about bad publicity in the business section." Sarah tried to look casually interested. "Oh. Apparently, there was some sort of public resignation, accusations of corporate mismanagement, the kind of thing that makes the society pages when it involves families like the Wellingtons." "The Wellingtons?" Eleanor gave her a sharp look. "You know, I get the feeling you're not asking out of idle curiosity." Sarah felt her cheeks warm. "It's complicated." "Well, the best stories usually are," Eleanor said encouragingly. Before Sarah could decide how much to reveal, her phone rang. Unknown number, with a Miami area code. "Dr. Chen?" The voice was unfamiliar, professional. "This is Janet Morrison from Miami General. I'm sorry to bother you on your vacation, but we have a situation." Sarah's stomach dropped. "What kind of situation?" "There's been an accident at one of the hotels downtown. Multiple injuries, and we're short-staffed in trauma surgery today. Dr. Rodriguez suggested I call you." "What hotel?" Sarah asked, though she had a sinking feeling she already knew. "The Wellington South Beach. Some kind of structural failure in the lobby during renovation work. We have at least 6 people trapped, unknown number of casualties." Sarah was already standing, gathering her things. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. "Thank you, Dr. Chen. And there's something else. One of the hotel executives was injured in the collapse, Marcus Wellington. He's being brought in now." The phone slipped from Sarah's hand. Eleanor was beside her instantly, steadying her. "What is it, honey?" "I have to go," Sarah said, her training kicking in over the shock. "There's been an accident." "The Wellington Hotel?" Eleanor asked quietly. Sarah nodded, unable to speak. "I'll drive you," Eleanor said firmly. "My car's in the hotel lot, and you're in no condition to be behind the wheel right now." Sarah wanted to protest, but Eleanor was right. Her hands were shaking as she tried to process what the hospital had told her. Marcus was hurt. Marcus was being brought to Miami General, and she was going to have to walk into that emergency room and be Dr. Chen, not Sarah, who'd had coffee with him yesterday and felt her heart skip when he smiled. Eleanor's car was a practical Honda that she drove with surprising speed through Miami traffic. "Tell me about him," she said as they navigated toward the hospital. "I don't know what you mean." "The Wellington man. Marcus, I assume, since that's the name that made you drop your phone." Sarah stared out the window. "We met on the plane. Ended up sitting next to each other because of a booking mix-up." "And?" "And nothing. We had coffee. It was nice. But we're from different worlds." "Different how?" "He's rich, I'm not. He lives in New York, I live in Seattle. He runs luxury hotels, I work in a hospital emergency room." Sarah's voice was mechanical, listing facts to avoid thinking about the emotion underneath. "It was just a vacation thing. Hmm, Eleanor said in a tone that suggested she wasn't buying it. And that's why you look like someone just told you the world was ending. They pulled up to Miami General as the first ambulance was arriving. Sarah could see the paramedics working on someone, but from this distance, she couldn't tell who it was. Thank you, Sarah said, getting out of the car. For the ride, for... Go, Eleanor said gently. Do what you do best. Save people. Sarah ran toward the emergency entrance, her beach clothes and flip-flops incongruous against the clinical urgency of the hospital. Dr. Rodriguez met her at the door. Thank God you're here, he said. We've got multiple casualties incoming. Ceiling collapse during renovation work. The hotel was mostly empty, but there were still staff and some construction workers. Marcus Wellington? Sarah asked, trying to keep her voice professional. Conscious but trapped for about 40 minutes. Possible head injury, definitely some cuts and bruises. He's in trauma too. Sarah hesitated for a split second. Protocol said she should treat the most critical patients first, regardless of personal connection. But she also knew that seeing Marcus would either help her focus or completely derail her ability to function professionally. I'll take the construction worker in trauma 1, she said. Brief me on his condition. Rodriguez looked surprised, but nodded. Crush injury to the leg, possible internal bleeding. He's stable but needs surgery. For the next 3 hours, Sarah lost herself in the familiar rhythm of emergency medicine. The construction worker's surgery went well, no internal bleeding, and the leg injury was less severe than initially feared. She treated 2 hotel staff members for cuts and minor fractures, consulted on a guest who'd had a panic attack during the evacuation. Through it all, she was aware of Trauma Room 2, where other doctors were working on Marcus. She caught glimpses through the doorway, him conscious and talking, which was a good sign, but she forced herself to stay focused on her own patients. It wasn't until everything was stable that she finally allowed herself to check on him. Marcus was sitting up in bed, a bandage over his left eyebrow and his arm in a sling. He looked pale but alert, and when he saw her in the doorway, his expression shifted to something she couldn't quite read. "Dr. Chen," he said formally, "I heard you were here." "Mr. Wellington," she replied, matching his tone. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a ceiling," Marcus said with a weak attempt at humor, though apparently it could have been much worse. "The doctor said if I'd been standing 2 feet to the left." "You were lucky," Sarah said, checking his chart. "Mild concussion, some lacerations, dislocated shoulder. You'll be sore for a while, but no permanent damage." "That's good to hear," Marcus said. "Though I have to ask, are you here as my doctor or—" Sarah looked at him, at the vulnerability in his expression despite his attempt to keep things professional. "I'm here because there was an emergency, and I'm a doctor. That's what I do." "Right," Marcus said quietly. "Of course." The silence stretched between them, filled with everything they weren't saying. "The hotel," Sarah said finally. "Is it bad?" Marcus said. "The renovation company cut corners on safety protocols. The ceiling collapse was completely preventable." His voice was tired, defeated. 3 people are seriously injured because someone wanted to save money on proper structural support. That's not your fault, isn't it? Marcus looked at her directly. "I'm supposed to oversee these projects. I'm supposed to make sure our contractors follow safety regulations. I was in that lobby because I was finally doing my job instead of hiding in conference rooms." Sarah heard something in his voice. Guilt, but also something else. Something that sounded almost like relief. "You were doing your job," she said carefully. "The job you told me you hate." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "You know what the strangest part is? When that ceiling came down, when I was lying there waiting for the paramedics, the first thing I thought wasn't about the hotel or the company, or what this would mean for our insurance rates. What was it? I thought about you," Marcus said simply. "About what you said yesterday, about figuring out who I am when I'm not performing for everyone else. And I realized that maybe getting buried under a ceiling was the universe's way of telling me it's time to stop hiding." Sarah found herself in the hospital cafeteria at midnight, staring at a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. Marcus had been discharged with instructions to rest and follow up with his doctor in New York, but something about their conversation kept replaying in her mind. "Thought I might find you here?" She looked up to see Marcus standing by her table, still wearing the hospital scrubs they'd given him after cutting away his ruined suit. His arm was still in a sling, and the bandage over his eyebrow made him look younger somehow. "You should be resting," Sarah said automatically. "Probably," Marcus agreed, sliding into the chair across from her. "But I couldn't sleep. Too much adrenaline," the doctor said. "Plus I keep thinking about what happened today." "The accident?" "No. Well, yes, but not just that." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "I called my father from my hospital bed." Sarah waited. "I told him I was resigning from Wellington Hotels," Marcus said simply. "You what?" Sarah nearly choked on her cold coffee. "I quit. Effective immediately. Well, effective as soon as I get back to New York and clean out my office." Marcus's voice was steady, but Sarah could see uncertainty in his eyes. "I told him it was time for the company to find someone who actually wanted to run luxury hotels, instead of someone who was just good at pretending." "Marcus." Sarah didn't know what to say. "Are you sure? I mean, what will you do?" "I have absolutely no idea," Marcus said, and for the first time since she'd met him, he sounded completely free. "Which is terrifying and exciting and probably the best decision I've made in my adult life." Sarah studied his face. "What did your father say?" "He was not pleased. There was a lot of shouting about responsibility and legacy and disappointing the family. But you know what? I've been disappointing myself for years by staying in a job I hated. At least now I'm only disappointing him." "And your sister? The marine biologist?" Marcus smiled, a real smile this time. "Rachel?" She laughed, actually laughed. Then she said it was about time I grew a backbone and offered me her couch in San Diego while I figure out what comes next. "San Diego's nice," Sarah said weakly. "It is, though it's still not Seattle." They looked at each other across the small cafeteria table, and Sarah felt something shift in the air between them. The same thing she'd felt on the airplane, but different now, clearer. "Sarah," Marcus said carefully, "what I said yesterday about not knowing who I am outside of work, I think I was wrong about that." "How so?" "I think I've always known who I was. I just never had the courage to be that person." Marcus leaned forward slightly. "The man who talked to you on that plane, who spilled champagne on himself and made jokes about airline etiquette. That wasn't an act. That was me, maybe for the first time in years." Sarah felt her heart do something complicated. "Marcus, I know the timing is terrible. I know I just blew up my entire life, and you're supposed to be on vacation, and we still live on opposite sides of the country. But I also know that yesterday you said maybe we met at the wrong time, and I think you were wrong. I think we met at exactly the right time," Marcus continued. "Right when we both needed to remember who we are, when we're not hiding behind our jobs, or our fears, or other people's expectations." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, thinking about the past few days, about how she'd felt more like herself sitting next to Marcus on the airplane than she had in months of emergency room rotations. About how seeing his name on the casualty list had made her realize that her feelings for him were more than just vacation attraction. "You know," she said finally, "I've been thinking about something you said yesterday, about me needing to figure out who Sarah is when she's not saving people. And I think maybe I've been afraid of that person. The one who drinks champagne and talks to strangers and takes risks that don't involve medical emergencies." Sarah met his eyes. The one who might be willing to try a long-distance relationship with someone she met on an airplane. Marcus's face lit up. "Really? Really? Though I should warn you, I'm terrible at relaxing. I work too much and I have strong opinions about proper airplane etiquette." "Perfect," Marcus said. "I'm currently unemployed, have no idea what I want to do with my life, and apparently make terrible decisions when hit by falling ceilings." "We're quite a pair," Sarah observed. "We are," Marcus agreed. Though I have to ask, how exactly does this work? The long-distance thing? Sarah considered this. I don't know. I've never done anything like this before. But I'm thinking phone calls, video chats, visits when we can manage it. You did say your sister has a couch in San Diego, which is considerably closer to Seattle than New York. True. And I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, about how hotels make people happy. Maybe there's a way to do that without wearing expensive suits and managing quarterly profits. Like what? I don't know yet, but I'm thinking smaller scale, more personal, places where the goal is actually making people comfortable, not just maximizing revenue per room. Marcus paused. Though first, I should probably figure out how to live on something other than a trust fund. That sounds terrifying and wonderful, Sarah said. It does, doesn't it? Marcus grinned. Want to be terrified and wonderful together? Sarah looked at him, really looked at him, at the bandage over his eyebrow and the hospital scrubs and the uncertain excitement in his expression. At this man who'd just upended his entire life because a ceiling fell on him and made him realize he'd been hiding from himself. Yes, she said simply. I do. Marcus reached across the table with his good hand and took hers. So what happens now? Now I finish my vacation by actually relaxing for once. You go back to New York, quit your job properly, and figure out what you want to do next. And we call each other every day and see what happens. What about when you get back to Seattle? Sarah smiled. Then we figure out how to make this work, one day at a time, one phone call at a time, one visit at a time. I like that plan, Marcus said. Good, Sarah said, squeezing his hand, because I think we're about to find out that impossible things really do happen every day. 6 months later, Sarah stood in the arrival area of San Diego International Airport, scanning the crowd for a familiar face. Her heart was doing that fluttery thing it had started doing whenever she was about to see Marcus, which, thankfully, had been happening more frequently lately. They'd managed the long-distance relationship better than either of them had expected. Daily phone calls that sometimes lasted hours, video chats during her lunch breaks, care packages sent back and forth across the country. Marcus had been true to his word about figuring out who he was outside of Wellington hotels, and Sarah had discovered that she was actually capable of taking weekends off occasionally. Dr. Chen, I presume? Sarah turned to find Marcus approaching with a grin and a small bouquet of flowers that looked suspiciously like they'd been purchased from the airport gift shop. He was wearing jeans and a simple button-down shirt, and he looked more relaxed than she'd ever seen him. Mr. Ex-Executive Vice President, she replied, accepting the flowers and a kiss that made her temporarily forget they were in a crowded airport. How was the flight? Marcus asked, taking her carry-on bag. Uneventful, though I did get upgraded to first class again, which made me think of you. Sarah smiled. No champagne spills this time, though. Disappointing. That's how I knew we were meant to be. Your complete inability to handle airplane beverages gracefully. That was you who spilled, not me, Sarah protested as they walked toward the exit. Details, Marcus said dismissively. So, are you ready to see my new life? Over the past 6 months, Marcus had indeed figured out what he wanted to do. With some financial backing from a surprisingly supportive Rachel and a small business loan, he'd opened a boutique bed and breakfast in La Jolla. Nothing like the massive luxury hotels of his family's empire, just 8 rooms in a converted Victorian house, each one decorated with care and attention to detail that actually made guests feel welcome rather than impressed. I still can't believe you're a B&B owner, Sarah said as they drove along the coast. It's so normal, Marcus suggested. I was going to say perfect, Sarah corrected, though normal works too. The seaside house, Marcus's B&B, was everything Sarah had imagined and more. Painted a soft blue-grey with white trim, surrounded by gardens that Rachel had helped design, with a view of the Pacific that made Sarah understand why people moved to California. Welcome to my empire, Marcus said as they pulled into the driveway. Population, me, my assistant manager Rosa, and whoever's staying the night. It's beautiful, Sarah said, meaning it. I can see why your guests love it. Speaking of guests, Marcus said, I should probably mention that someone specifically requested to meet you. Who? Eleanor Morrison. She's become something of a regular since I opened. Apparently she has a theory about vacation romances that she's been dying to test, Sarah laughed. Eleanor? The woman from the beach in Miami? How did she even find out about this place? Long story involving my sister, a marine biology conference, and Eleanor's surprisingly extensive network of friends. She says she wants to see how our impossible thing turned out. They found Eleanor on the back patio, reading a book and sipping what appeared to be a very sophisticated cocktail. She looked exactly the same as she had 6 months ago, silver hair perfectly styled and knowing eyes that missed nothing. There's my favorite vacation romance, Eleanor said, standing to give Sarah a hug. You look happy, honey. Much more relaxed than the last time I saw you. Thank you for the ride to the hospital that day, Sarah said. I never properly thanked you. Nonsense. I got to be part of a love story. That's payment enough. Eleanor turned to Marcus. And you, I have to say, leaving the family business suits you. You look like yourself now. Feel like myself too, Marcus agreed. Though I have Sarah to thank for that. She's the one who told me I needed to figure out who I was when I wasn't performing for everyone else. And what did you figure out? Eleanor asked. Marcus looked at Sarah, then back at Eleanor. I figured out that I'm someone who likes making people feel at home, who enjoys cooking breakfast for strangers and helping them plan their perfect day, who'd rather have 8 guests who leave happy than 80 guests who just leave. And you, Sarah, what did you figure out? Sarah considered the question. Over the past 6 months, she'd made some changes of her own. She'd started taking actual lunch breaks, had said no to extra shifts when she didn't need the money, had even taken a long weekend to visit Marcus in March. I figured out that I don't have to choose between being a doctor and being a person, Sarah said. That taking care of myself doesn't make me selfish, and that maybe the best way to help people is to actually know how to be happy. Wise words, Eleanor said approvingly. So what's next for you two? Sarah and Marcus exchanged a look. They'd been talking about this for weeks, the logistics of being together permanently instead of just visiting each other. Well, Marcus said carefully, there's a position opening up at Scripps Medical Center, emergency medicine attending, if someone were interested in applying. Someone might be very interested, Sarah said, her heart racing. Assuming someone else would be okay with that someone moving to San Diego. Someone else would be thrilled, Marcus said. In fact, someone else has been hoping that someone would consider it. Eleanor clapped her hands together. Oh, this is better than any romance novel I've ever read. When? If I get the job, this summer, Sarah said, which is terrifying and exciting and perfect, Marcus finished, just like everything else about this. They sat on the patio as the sun set over the Pacific, Eleanor regaling them with stories of other vacation romances she'd witnessed over the years. Most of them, she admitted, hadn't worked out as well as theirs seemed to be. What do you think made the difference? Marcus asked. Timing, Eleanor said immediately. Not the timing of when you met, but the timing of when you were ready to meet. You were both at places in your lives where you needed to change, needed to grow. The airplane seat mix-up just gave you the opportunity. So you think it would have happened anyway? Sarah asked. Oh, honey, I think you two were meant to find each other somehow. Maybe not on that specific flight, but somewhere, somehow. The universe has a way of putting people together when they're ready to be found. Later that evening, after Eleanor had retired to her room and the other guests had settled in for the night, Sarah and Marcus walked along the beach behind the B&B. The same ocean that had been visible from their coffee shop in Miami, Sarah realized, just viewed from a different angle. Are you sure about this? Marcus asked, as they stopped to watch the waves. Moving here, leaving Seattle, starting over? Are you sure about me moving in with the B&B owner who used to be a hotel executive? Sarah countered. Completely sure, Marcus said without hesitation. Though I should probably warn you that B&B owners get up very early to make breakfast for their guests. And I should warn you that emergency room doctors get called in at all hours for trauma cases. So we'll both be tired a lot? Probably, Sarah agreed, but we'll be tired together. Marcus stopped walking and turned to face her. Sarah, there's something I've been wanting to ask you. What? Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Sarah's breath caught. I know this is fast, and I know we're still figuring things out, but I also know that I don't want to figure anything out without you. Marcus opened the box to reveal a simple, elegant ring that caught the moonlight. Will you marry me? Sarah looked at the ring, at Marcus's hopeful expression, at the ocean stretching endlessly in front of them. 6 months ago, she'd been a workaholic doctor who didn't know how to relax. He'd been a miserable hotel executive living someone else's life. Now they were standing on a beach in California, talking about building a life together around a bed and breakfast and a hospital job, and the crazy idea that airplane seat mix-ups could change everything. Yes, she said simply. Yes, absolutely, completely yes. Marcus slipped the ring onto her finger with hands that were only slightly shaking. Really? Even though I have no idea what I'm doing most of the time. Especially because of that, Sarah said. I've spent my whole life knowing exactly what I was doing. It's time I tried something different. They kissed as the waves crashed behind them, and Sarah thought about Eleanor's words about impossible things happening every day, about how a wrong seat assignment had led to champagne spills and turbulence confessions, and a love story neither of them had been looking for. So, what happens now? Marcus asked, echoing his question from that hospital cafeteria 6 months ago. Now we plan a wedding, I move to San Diego, and we see what other impossible things we can make happen, Sarah said. I like that plan, Marcus said, just as he had before. Good, Sarah replied, looking at her ring, at Marcus, at the endless ocean in front of them, because I have a feeling our story is just getting started. Above them a plane passed overhead, its lights blinking against the dark sky as it carried other passengers toward their own destinations, some planned, some unexpected, all of them possibilities waiting to unfold.